There is something about watching a person discover what the rest of the world thinks of them. Not through a journalist's filtered lens, not through a carefully prepared press release, not even through a fan letter carefully composed and sent to a fan club address. No, raw, unfiltered, anonymous. The kinds of things people type into a search bar at 2 in the morning when no one is watching. That is exactly what happened when BTS sat down with Wired for their 2026 autocomplete interview, and out of all 7 members, nobody's segment hit different quite like Jimin's. Before we even get into what was on that board, because we are absolutely getting into it, let's just take a moment to appreciate what kind of moment this actually was. BTS is back. The era is in full swing. 7 men, who spent years apart, fulfilling their mandatory military service in South Korea, have returned as one unit, older, sharper, more certain of themselves than ever before. And in the middle of press runs, world tour preparations, and chart-topping singles, they walked into a Wired studio and agreed to let the internet interrogate them. That takes confidence. That takes a very specific kind of comfort with yourself. And if you watched that interview, you know, nobody wore that confidence quite like ParkJimin. Wired's autocomplete interview is one of the most iconic formats in pop culture media at this point. The concept is deceptively simple. Take the most commonly Googled search terms about a celebrity, print them on cards, and make them answer. No prep, no pre-approved questions. Just the unfiltered curiosity of the entire internet, distilled into a stack of cardboard. For celebrities who have built carefully managed public images, this can be genuinely terrifying. For someone like Jimin, a man who has been one of the most Googled humans on the planet for close to a decade, it could have gone either way. It went perfectly, and ARMY absolutely lost their minds. Let's start at the beginning of his section, because the setup alone was already giving us everything. Jimin is sitting there, blonde hair, black blazer, silver chain necklace, completely calm, and Jungkook is right there beside him. Just that image alone sent Twitter into orbit. The two of them, side by side, looking like they just walked off a Fashion Week runway, preparing to read whatever bizarre thing the internet decided to type about Jimin at 3 in the morning. The contrast of how composed they looked versus what was about to happen on that board. Chef's kiss. And then the first card flipped, and the room shifted. Why is Jimin called Machi? Now, for any ARMY reading this who has somehow been living under a rock, Machi is one of Jimin's most iconic nicknames, and it has followed him since almost the very beginning of BTS's career. The origin story of this nickname is genuinely one of K-pop's most adorable pieces of fan culture history. When BTS debuted, Jimin was young, fresh-faced, with soft round cheeks that fans immediately decided reminded them of mochi, the Japanese rice cake dessert known for being impossibly squishy, impossibly soft, and absolutely irresistible. His pout, his expressions, the way his cheeks would puff up when he laughed, all of it mapped perfectly onto the visual of a mochi. The name stuck. It never left. It only grew. Over the years, Machi became more than a cute nickname. It became a whole identity. It showed up in BTS fan art. It became the go-to descriptor for Jimin's entire energy, soft but dense, sweet but with substance, gentle on the outside with something chewy and satisfying at the core. It was the nickname that James Corden famously engaged with during the BTS carpool karaoke, which led to the legendary Papa Machi and Baby Machi moment that broke the internet back in 2020. It is the nickname that has been trending on social media so many times that at this point, the word Machi and the name Jimin are practically synonymous in certain corners of the internet. So when that card came up in the Wired interview, why is Jimin called Machi, you would expect Jimin to have a practiced answer ready. He has answered this question 100 times in 100 different formats. And yet, the way he reacted, the tiny smile that crept onto his face, the way he tilted his head just slightly, the way his eyes did that thing they do when he's genuinely amused rather than performing amusement, it felt completely unscripted. It felt like he was seeing the question fresh. Like even after all these years, the fact that millions of people are still Googling this at all still catches him off guard in the best possible way. He touched his own cheek. That's the detail that ARMY keeps coming back to. He read the card, and his hand went to his cheek almost automatically. Like even he, the man who has been called Machi for the better part of a decade, still finds the whole thing a little surreal. A little sweet. A little funny. Jungkook, sitting right next to him, was already grinning before Jimin even fully processed the question. Because Jungkook knows. He was there. He watched this nickname attach itself to Jimin in real time, watched it travel from Korean fan communities to global media to James Corden's Twitter bio. He watched it become bigger than any of them anticipated. And the way Jimin explained it, not in a rehearsed, PR-approved soundbite way, but in that soft, slightly self-conscious way he has when he talks about things that he finds genuinely endearing about himself, was everything. He acknowledged the cheeks. He acknowledged the pout. He acknowledged the entire mythology that has built up around this one small word, this one sweet descriptor that the internet decided belongs to him and him alone. And he did it with the kind of grace that only Jimin can pull off, where he manages to be simultaneously humble and completely, effortlessly charming. But then the second card, and this is where things got interesting. Why does Jimin not like mango? Okay, let's talk about this. Because the fact that this is a top Google autocomplete result for Jimin is one of the most genuinely niche, wonderfully specific pieces of evidence that BTS ARMY is unlike any other fanbase on the planet. Somewhere, at some point in BTS history, Jimin mentioned that mango was not his favorite fruit. That's it. That is the entire origin story. One offhand comment, possibly from a fan meeting, possibly from a Weverse Live, possibly from one of the thousands of hours of content that BTS has produced over their career, became so notable to fans that millions of people are now Googling it. Not Jimin favorite food. Not Jimin diet. Specifically, why does Jimin not like mango? The level of attention to detail that requires from a fan base is almost incomprehensible if you're not in this world. To a casual observer, this looks like a strange thing to Google. But to ARMY, it makes complete sense. Because when you care about someone this deeply, when you have followed their career through the highest highs and the most grueling challenges, when you have watched them grow from teenagers into global icons, the small details matter. The food preferences matter. The fruit opinions matter. Every single thing becomes a piece of the mosaic. And Jimin's reaction to seeing this question was, by all accounts, genuine surprise mixed with complete delight. The fact that this made it onto the autocomplete board, the fact that enough people Googled this specific question for it to register as a trend, seemed to strike him as both hilarious and oddly moving. Because what it represents, underneath the comedy of it, is the depth of attention that ARMY pays to him. Not just to his music, not just to his performances, not just to his public persona. To him, to the texture of who he is as a person, including the entirely mundane fact of his fruit preferences. This is the thing about Jimin that gets lost sometimes in conversations about BTS, particularly in Western media coverage that tends to flatten all 7 members into a single unified entity. Jimin has a specific, irreplaceable relationship with ARMY that is different from any of the other members. It is deeply personal in a way that is hard to articulate without spending time in the fandom. He has always been the member most visibly in dialogue with fans, not just in terms of frequency of communication, but in terms of emotional register. When Jimin speaks to ARMY, it feels like he is speaking to each individual person in a room of millions simultaneously. And ARMY responds to that in kind, by paying the kind of attention to him that results in "Why does Jimin not like mango?" becoming a trending Google search. What the Wired interview did, in the span of a few minutes, was give us a window into how Jimin experiences being this known. And the answer, based on everything his reaction communicated, is that he experiences it with wonder. Not entitlement, not exhaustion, not the kind of practiced graciousness that celebrities sometimes perform when confronted with evidence of their own fame. Genuine wonder. The genuine, "You're still thinking about me? You're still curious about me?" After all this time, energy that has always been at the heart of Jimin's relationship with the people who love his work. And it makes sense when you understand where he came from. Jimin grew up in Busan, trained incredibly hard to become the artist he wanted to be, and has been remarkably open over the years about the fact that his journey was not always easy. He has talked about the pressure he put on himself, the self-doubt that followed him through BTS's early years, the moments when he wondered if he was enough. He has talked about how ARMY's presence and love helped him through those moments in ways that went beyond fan support and into something that genuinely shaped who he became. So when he sits in that Wired chair and sees that millions of people are Googling questions about him, questions as grand as his artistry and as small as his mango opinions, the wonder on his face is not an effect. It is a natural expression of someone who genuinely never takes being loved for granted. There is something else worth noting about this interview that goes beyond Jimin specifically, but that Jimin embodies better than anyone. The Arirang era is different from everything BTS has done before. This is not the BTS of 2019, grinding through a comeback cycle at a pace that by their own admission was unsustainable. This is not even the BTS of 2021 and 2022, pushing themselves through the pandemic era, while quietly approaching a breaking point they could all feel coming. This is BTS in 2026, rested, grown, intentional. Men who chose to come back, who had the time apart to remember why they do this, to figure out who they are outside of the group, and then to consciously choose to return to it. That choice shows in every interview moment from this era. It shows in how they talk to each other, how they interact with interviewers, how they sit in a room and take up space. There is an ease to this version of BTS that is genuinely new. And nowhere is that ease more visible than in Jimin during that Wired segment. He is not performing composure. He is not carefully managing his image. He is just there, fully present, reading cards that the internet made, touching his own cheek, laughing at his own mango discourse, and being exactly and completely himself. Let's also talk about what his reactions communicated beyond the specific questions, because this is where it gets really interesting for anyone who has been studying Jimin's public persona for any length of time. There is a version of Jimin that ARMY has known for years, the performative variety show version, the one that does EGO and plays into the machi narrative and gives the people what they want in a very deliberate way. And then there is this other Jimin, the one who shows up in quieter moments, in unguarded interview seconds, in the spaces between the performance. The one who is genuinely thoughtful, genuinely curious, genuinely moved by things. The Wired interview caught both versions in rapid succession, and the transition between them was almost imperceptible unless you were watching closely. He would lean into the playfulness of a question, the machi card, the mango card, with all the charm and charisma that has made him one of the most magnetic performers of his generation. And then, in the half second between cards, you would catch the other Jimin, the one looking at his bandmates with real warmth, the one whose eyes go soft when he thinks something is genuinely funny rather than just performing laughter, the one who, even in the middle of a carefully constructed press moment, cannot fully conceal how much he actually means everything he does. ARMY has been talking about this for years, and the Wired interview gave mainstream media a concentrated, easily clippable version of it. The clips are everywhere now. His machi reaction is a gif. The mango moment is a meme. His entire section of the interview has been dissected, captioned, translated into a dozen languages, and shared across every platform that will allow it. Because that is what happens when someone is authentically themselves in front of a camera. The internet knows. The internet can always tell. And when the internet meets someone who is the real thing, it spreads the evidence everywhere. ParkJimin is the most Googled member of one of the most Googled groups in the history of modern music. That is not an accident. That is not just the result of good management or strategic marketing, though both of those things play a role. It is the result of who he is and how he has consistently chosen to show up, with openness, with intention, with a relationship to his own vulnerability that somehow never reads as weakness, only as depth. The internet Googles Jimin because Jimin gives them reason to. Because every interview, every performance, every candid moment is an invitation to look closer, and looking closer always reveals something worth finding. The Wired autocomplete interview for Arirang's comeback cycle is going to be one of those pieces of content that ARMY returns to for years. Not because anything dramatic happened, not because there was a major revelation or a controversial moment, but because it was a perfect, crystallized version of something that is increasingly rare in the celebrity media landscape, a genuinely human moment. A moment where a person encountered what the world thinks of them and responded with something other than carefully managed public relations. Responded with a hand to his cheek. Responded with real laughter. Responded with wonder. This is what Jimin does. This is what he has always done. And if you are watching the Arirang era unfold, through the album, through the world tour, through the interviews and the Weverse posts and the Fallon performances and all of it, what you are watching is a man who has figured out exactly who he is and has decided to just be that. Fully. Without apology. Without calculation. Just ParkJimin, reading what the world is Googling about him, touching his cheek, laughing about mangoes, and making millions of people feel like they know him. Because they do. That is the thing. That is the whole thing. They do. If this video brought you something, if it gave you a new angle on a moment you already loved, or helped you understand why that wired clip hit differently than most interview content does, please give it a like, because that genuinely helps this channel reach more army who want this kind of content. Subscribe if you want to stay in the Erarang era with me, because we have so much more to cover. The tour is just beginning, the content is everywhere, and I am not slowing down. And drop in the comments, what was your favorite Jimin moment from the Wired interview? Which card hit you the hardest? I read every single comment, and talking about Jimin with this community is genuinely one of my favorite things. I'll see you in the next one. Borahi.